Okay. Hello everyone. I am just getting us sorted. So for everyone that has joined us, I am Mags. I'm Obscure Ethereal on Twitter. I'm going to talk to you about demons. I also forgot to mute that, so I will stop that. Okay, so it feels very strange talking into the void, but do know that there is a Q&A tab. I will take any of your questions and possibly be able to answer them. I'm here to talk to you about demons. So it's a sort of very broad subject, demons 101, that'll hopefully be interesting enough and give you some potential ideas for creative work in this Good Omens fandom. And you might think, demons, yeah, know all about demons, me, demon's a demon, right? In fact, the history of demons is bamboozlingly convoluted at times, and that's just when we're dealing with a very sort of loosely Western Christian tradition. So for today, I've tried to distill this into some key aspects in the history of demonic understanding and representation. We're going to look at demons in a specifically Western Christian context, as this is the one that pertains most to the universe of Good Omens, and go on a bit of a whirlwind tour. Now, here we go. This helpful timeline, or possibly not helpful timeline, depending on your perspective. Don't get too bogged down in this. This is just so we know, because I know that not everybody has a wonderful grasp of when things happened. So, starting off, Greek thought around that time period. This is not the whole of the Greek period, a broad period that we have texts about thought on daimonis and spirits. We also have Jewish influence, particularly from what's called an Enochian tradition from the Book of Enoch. This was largely officially rejected from the 2nd century, but it does have particular influence. The church fathers, in the sort of early years after Christ, are important theologians that had a lot of influence on later thought. The medieval period is my particular speciality, and I've divided it there. So early, high, late, that just gives you a little broad overview of time periods. So not everything's particularly monolithic. The early modern, or the Renaissance, 1450 to 1780s, and yes, I know that that covers the Georgian and Edwardian periods. History is less like a timeline and more of a sort of messy Venn diagram. We have a series of what are termed occult revivals. Now, I'm not going to cover very much about those today, but you can ask me questions about those if you're interested. Particularly from the Victorian period onwards. Then we have a kind of series of modern occult revivals from the 1970s on, and some particularly just before Good Omens is published, which is quite interesting. It's still there in 21st century pop culture, contemporary theology. Obviously, I have a lot more expertise in the medieval period, so I reserve the right to indulge in talking a bit more about that than some of the others. Okay, so we'll look a little bit at some of the aspects that relate specifically to the presentation of demons in Good Omens. So you can see them all here in all their loveliness. The representation is what we're going to keep coming back to, looking at how these examples are reflected in traditions of the past and how they differ. I'll get into a bit more detail as we go, but to start with, got demons in Good Omens that are supernatural beings. They're non-human. They take various forms between humanoid and bestial. And there's no standard demon here. They're residents of hell downstairs, but they can travel, they can reside on earth, and this kind of middle ground between hell and heaven. And certainly most of the named active demons in the show are described as fallen angels. Though in the book there are references to younger demons and to imps. So it's unclear whether all of the host of hell is made up of fallen angels, or whether some demons came into being after the fall. Many of the humanoid demons have characteristics of a particular animal. They're demon sona, as we like to say. In some cases, an animal actually sits on their heads. Whether or not this is bound to the humanoid form is unclear. But both of these aspects will appear again and again in examples we're going to look at. So in case this seems a bit terrifying, today I'm going to distill things further, focusing in on some specific questions about demons that give us a very basic overview of what they're about. So what demons are, what's their nature, what are they made of, how did they come to be, what demons look like, their appearance, particularly their physicality, what demons do, so what's their function, but this also encompasses what can they do. So to start us off, what demons are. Now this is quite a lot of text. I can share this with you at any point. I can answer questions, but this is just a bit of background. So the term demon comes from Latin daimon and ultimately from Greek daimon. The Greek term for this is an intermediary spirit that exists in the air. It's incorporeal. It mediates between gods and humans. Some of them are good, some of them are evil. They're referred to as cloudy spirits, not made of terrestrial matter. In the Jewish Enochian tradition, you have angels known as the Watchers. These are heavenly beings that are tempted into having sex with human women and producing offspring known as Nephilim, or giants. These offspring are destroyed in the Great Flood, but it's their bodies that are destroyed. So their spirits remain on earth without bodies. These are then known as demons, these spirits that wander the earth. And these demonic spirits teach magic to humans, and they're considered the source of evil. And this tradition continued, but it was very officially rejected both in Jewish tradition and Christian tradition because of saying that the spirits are the source of evil. So it took the onus off humanity. In the New Testament, we have what's referred to as an unclean or impure spirit. These are the devils that possess humans, that cause suffering, and can be driven out by the holy, so by Jesus, by the apostles, though they're not destroyed in the same way as those demonic spirits of the Enochian tradition wander from body to body. These spirits possess a body, are driven out, and try and find another one. They don't seem to have physical bodies of their own, so they take over others. The devil is shown to appear to tempt Christ. Some kind of physical form is implied, but it's not described. Throughout the Gospels and Revelation, you'll get references to Satan, the great serpent, and his followers falling from heaven after a war in heaven, and then taking up residence in hell. So you get imagery of the great beast, the dragon, the bottomless pit, all of these things that we're very familiar with in Good Omens. Now, when we come to the early Christian period, we get people trying to synthesize these traditions that come down to them, because they seem very separate, but they need a sort of coherent system. So all demons become considered evil, not neutral, not good. They are evil. They're those that fell from heaven with Lucifer. They try and synthesize this, but in some ways things still contradict, which is par for the course, really. These spirits are both of the air and residents of the deepest pits of hell. So they're above and below, they're everywhere, basically. A large rejection of that watcher tradition, but it still does persist and has influence. There's a great deal of uncertainty over whether demons have physical bodies, whether they are simply spirit or whether they can have their own body rather than just possessing another. So by the Middle Ages, we get a few broad concepts associated with demons and their nature. Demons are supernatural, non-human beings. They serve Satan, the devil of devils. The exact nature of the hierarchy is unclear and very debated, but Satan's consistently the boss. Demons are evil. Largely official doctrine describes demons as being evil by definition, because they're on the side of Satan, who is the adversary of heaven. What this means in practical terms and in terms of evil is action rather than an inherent state of existence. We'll come on to in a little bit. Now, we've also got an idea of demons as being irredeemable. And this is a question whether demons can be redeemed. There are a number of thinkers, including Origen in the 6th century, that's one of the most notable, that argued if Christ died to redeem all sin, this would also apply to fallen angels, and that after the end of days, everything would eventually be reconciled. This was quickly officially declared heresy. Indeed, a lot of the major heresies that are known involve uncomfortable questions about the nature of good and evil. Just as a side note, not all heresy results in being offed, being burnt at the stake, particularly in the earlier period, though it's not a great thing for your position in society, your job, blah, blah, blah. There are a number of stories of demons repenting their fall, actually. They're shown to continue to suffer because they cannot be redeemed as a human can. These sort of key aspects of demonic nature continue in various ways over hundreds of years, in largely similar terms, and they're also played out in Good Omens, very thought-provokingly, in fact. There's a number of instances where this is addressed. So demons as evil. You get, yes, but you're a demon. I'm not sure if it's actually possible for you to do good, said Aziraphale. It's down to your basic, nature, nothing personal, you understand. So this is when they're chatting on the wall in the book. We start off with this concept that demonic nature is fixed. This eventually gets torn apart, but we'll get on to that. Then you've got them discussing the nature of the Antichrist. The child is potentially evil, potentially good, argues Crowley. And good and evil, they're just names for sides. We know that. So this name for sides, demons are by definition bad, simply because the system is set up as two opposing sides. Evil is not, in fact, inbuilt, it's based on action. But at the same time, you've got a sort of dogma that demons are evil because they're in league with Satan. Hell wasn't a major reservoir of evil any more than heaven, in Crowley's opinion, was a fountain of goodness. They were just sides in the great cosmic chess game, where you found the real McCoy, the real grace, and the real heart-stopping evil was right inside the human mind. So again, you've got this evil as action. Heaven and hell are place markers, almost. That evil is, real evil is a human thing. As Crowley would be the first to protest, most demons weren't deep down evil. They occupied the same position as tax inspectors doing an unpopular job. Again, you've got this sort of language and meaning being played around with. Demons are the evil side, but they're not necessarily individually evil in their actions, although they can be. As he goes on to say about Hastur and Liger, that they take particular pleasure in doing evil deeds. So, thinking about irredeemable, we have that slightly heartbreaking, unforgivable, that's what I am. Which I'll actually think about second. The first quote, the second quote here is Crowley being threatened. Even if we lose, at least as far as you're concerned, it will make no difference at all. For as long as there's one demon left in hell, Crowley, you will wish you'd been created mortal. Because mortals can hope for death, for redemption. You can hope for nothing. Here, there is an implication that mortals can repent. They can be forgiven. Demons cannot. They are irredeemable. So you have that playing out there as well. In the first one, unforgivable, that's what I am. It hurts, particularly in the show at the bandstand. But heartbreaking as it is, Crowley's laying out his terms in this bandstand argument in a very, I will do anything for love, but I won't do that kind of way. Saying, Aziraphale can't pretend Crowley's anything but a demon. He's one of the fallen. It also implies that Crowley wouldn't actually change that now, in spite of what seems to be his continued belief in the Almighty, however complicated or angry. So it's sort of him standing up going, I am a demon. This is what I am. You know this. I'm not going to suddenly become an angel and make everything less complicated. So they're finally we move on to sort of their nature, the materiality or immateriality of demons. When Crowley travels through the telephone system, this is a quote from the book that says that demons can abandon their physical bodies very easily. They're not bound by physics. The only problem about dancing on the head of a pin is all those big gaps between electrons. For those of angel, stalker, demon breed, size, shape, composition are all simply options. This is actually really interesting when we put it in the context of a debate over whether demons have a material form. In Good Omens, we can clearly see demons can be given physical bodies. They can discorporate. The bodies do not necessarily conform to what is expected of a human body. They have bodies of matter, but that matter does not have a fixed form. And at the same time, they are also a spirit. So you've got this very mixed up spirit body, but a body that does not conform as a human body. It's material, but it's fluid, it's flexible, it can change form. And they were too small for sound, but demons don't necessarily need sound to communicate, which is sort of thrown in there. And a lovely sort of reference to the fact that human laws don't apply, that the way that they exist in the universe is different to how terrestrial beings exist. So having a body doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as having a human body, even if though it looks the same. Excuse me. A particularly interesting one, and one that harks back a lot to this tradition of immateriality. You've got Adam seeing the angels and the demons lining up for Armageddon at the airbase. Overhead, the sky was still clear, the air torn by nothing more than a light breeze. But it wasn't normal air, it had a crystallized look to it, so that you might feel that if you turned your head, you might see new facets. It sparkled. If you had to find a word to describe it, the word thronged might slip insidiously into your mind. Thronged with insubstantial beings awaiting only the right moment to become very substantial. In one sense, there was just clear air overhead, in another stretching off to infinity, were the hosts of heaven and hell, wingtip to wingtip. If you looked really closely and had been specially trained, you could tell the difference. So again, you've got that insubstantial becoming substantial, and that it can happen at will. And engages with a tradition that demons are both at once. You also get a nice indication that the physical nature of angels and demons is essentially the same, because they're made up of the same stuff. At the very end, facing Satan in the book, you get this quote, if you were going to go, you might as well go in your own true shape, feathers unfolded towards the sky. Your own true shape is really interesting, because it says a lot about Aziraphale and Crowley as characters. These bodies, these corporations they're in, with a few ethereal occult differences like the wings, are the ones that are true for them. They're true bodies that they're most at home in, not their spiritual form or any other sort of form that their body might take. These ones that they've inhabited on Earth are what they choose. In Good Omens, this nature of demons that we've seen is very inherited from medieval traditions, and this makes sense. It's fundamentally a very similar universe, one that presupposes the existence of spiritual existence, and a created universe with heaven and hell. It's very sympathetic, thoughtful treatment of the role of demonology in ethics and worldview. In a lot of modern media from the 19th century on, these aspects of demonic nature continue, but they no longer make this kind of rational sense. So they're made fantastic or horrific, ridiculous or metaphoric. Demons become metaphors most often rather than entities. The saying of demons often associated with mental illness, while at the same time the demonic figure becomes something for entertainment, the domain of the horror story. And on the other hand, belief in demons and in a spiritual world continues to exist in religion, in numerous occult revivals over the past century or two. And I can answer questions on that if you like. So, demonic appearance, what demons look like. So that this is where we get to the nice pictures. A few points persist. There's no one size fits all demon. They're often associated with both human form and bestial form, animal form, sometimes simultaneously, or they can change between the two. there's no real limit to these forms. On sort of the bottom left, you can see a manuscript image of Saint Guthlac surrounded by demons. All of these are bipedal, but they're with different animal forms. On top right, you've got Eve talking with a very lovely serpent with a human head. And if we think of the demons in Good Omens with their demon sonas as animals on their heads, etc., it isn't really a stretch from this view of demons taking on very animalistic physical forms. Demons may take on these forms, but their forms are rarely considered fixed. So most of the time, demons are depicted or described as shifting form if they're pursued, or if it becomes more practical to take on a different form. Demons can act alone. They can act with other demons. Going through some later art, so you've got this sort of early modern depiction of witches and demons, wings, aspects of cloven hooves and physicality, and goats featured particularly. Then we continue on these representations. Now you can study some of these slightly horrendous nightmare-inducing images. They're weird, they're different, they're slightly horrific and scary at times, and a little bit funny too. Once you come a little bit later, we start seeing very human demons with sort of horrific aspects. So you can see this winged creature up here on the right, with a sort of skeletal face, but the body is all human. On the right here, you've got one of Blake's works, William Blake. Satan calling up his legions. Satan, the legions, they're all humanoid. They look like men. There's the coloring and the imagery is different and mystical, but they look like men. The same goes for the bottom left. You will find this is a 20th century painting of a demon sitting, contemplating, looking very like a human. And up there you've got this slightly ridiculous version of demons, oddly enough from a very fundamentalist Christian tract that considers demons to be real, but at the same time objects of ridicule and fun. So our favorite demon, doesn't he look nice? He's described as nothing about him looking particularly demonic, at least by classical standards. No horns, no wings. He wasn't entertaining particularly demonic thoughts. He had dark hair and good cheekbones, and he was wearing snakeskin shoes, or at least presumably he was wearing shoes, and he could do really weird things with his tongue. And whenever he forgot himself, he had a tendency to hiss. He also didn't blink much. So with Crowley, Crowley is very human, but he still maintains these sort of key aspects that give away his demonic nature, sort of bodily abnormalities. And this is something that occurs in a lot of medieval and early modern stories. Demons that appear human, but their demonic nature is given away when they cannot hide a tail, or, as Sister Mary puts it, funny eyes or teensy weensy little hoofykins. So finally, what do demons do? What can demons do? demons typically have specific jobs to do. They're not just out there being evil. Even in past periods, in the medieval period and the early modern period. They're demons that tempt, torment saints. There are demons that focus on specific sins, lust, gluttony, etc. And there are lesser demons who are honestly just annoyances. One that's known by name, Tertivolus, whispers in your ear in church and distracts you from the word of God. But he doesn't do much else. There are demons that are particularly violent. So there are violent stories and things like that, alongside other demons that don't really do anything at all. In the story of Guthlac that we saw, surrounded by all the sort of animal demons, these demons only come to torment him when he comes to the pleasant land they've sort of been living in, chilling in for ages, and they don't want to leave. So some of them are really, really bad. Some of them are nuisances. Demons engage with humans. This is something that occurs throughout history. Obviously, as it's written by humans, we are interested in ourselves. So ways of engaging with humans, tempting, lying or deceiving. Demons as liars is an interesting one, particularly when we get in Good Omens. Do you think I'm lying to you? You're a demon. It's what you do. It's a bit like Aziraphale's been given a Demons 101 textbook, then met Crowley and has been trying to reconcile the two ever since, which is a bit like the history of demonology. So apart from this sort of temptation and deception, one thing that is particularly associated with demons is knowledge and the giving of forbidden knowledge, linked to magic. And there are a couple of kinds of this. The first would be known as sort of learned magic. This is typically very male, intellectual. They're often churchmen or clerics, and it's very book-based. So you get grimoires, which are sort of magical textbooks or books of spells, that will give, advice on how to conjure or speak with non-human beings. Now, some of these claim to be able to teach you how to speak to angels. Some of them are explicitly demonic, and that's where you get things like summoning circles and things like that, and names. It's particularly associated with language and with knowing the right words to say and the right symbols to use to bind demons, to get them to do what they're told, to exert power over them, which is typically backfires. With witchcraft, it is an interesting counterpoint to that. You've got a very sort of predominantly female lay, non-ecclesiastical, non-church based, relatively uneducated, and very practical in nature. So instead of wanting to know things about huge power, it might be about the crops this year, or curing someone's sickness, something like that. It's quite interesting, and in Good Omens you get references to both of these. You get witchcraft is consistently described. You also get references to learned magic, oddly enough, particularly connected to Aziraphale, which is slightly odd because, well, he's an angel. He's the one with the summoning circle. The difficulty between distinguishing between angelic and demonic. But he stands up as actually quite a good figure for that kind of intellectual pursuit, which is sort of a side note, but it's quite interesting in that context. Now, in terms of knowledge and this sort of forbidden knowledge, Aziraphale and Crowley and other angels and demons have in some ways more knowledge than humans about the future, about the past, but they're in the dark about the overall plan, the overall meaning of everything, just as the humans are. And Aziraphale and Crowley even debate ethics in quite a scholastic fashion over the millennia, and they're still trying to work things out. Agnes Nutter is termed a witch due to her knowledge. She's ahead of her time in medical advice, but she also clearly receives true prophecies. It's noted in the book that normally heaven or hell spotted the prophetic types and broadcast enough noises on the same mental channel to prevent any undue accuracy. But with Agnes, they don't. So there's a real question of where Agnes is actually getting her prophecies from. It's ineffable, you might say. And outside of the Witchfinder army that are clearly sort of figures of ridicule, there's no suggestion her prophecies are of demonic origin. Now, demons throughout history, and in all theology from the Desert Fathers on, are considered to have emotions, the same as humans. This raises a question that is relevant perhaps for all of us. Can demons love? So we don't have any kind of historical confirmation of that, but what we do get is that demons can have fondness for humans. So this implies that they can have positive emotions. So it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that they could have affection, have love. In a 13th century text of miracle stories, Caesarius of Heisterbach, there's an example of a demon that took human form, became a servant of a knight. He was only found out because he kept working miracles to help the knight and protect him and his wife. And the knight eventually sends this demon away because he's a demon. So in spite of what he's done and how he's acted, he's considered to be fundamentally evil and irredeemable. But it breaks both their hearts because they're friends. Crowley in the book mentions that he rather liked people and it was the major feeling in a demon. He's not technically supposed to have these soft feelings, but it's not impossible. The last thing that I'm going to touch on is, briefly before I wrap up, is free will, because this is a really interesting thing about demonology and about demons, and it's fundamental to the narrative of Good Omens. So throughout history, demons are shown to have extremely limited free will. They're thought to only be able to act within the bounds of what God will permit. In Good Omens, it's really interesting because we start with this idea that demonic nature and their free will is fixed. So in the book, you get this quite a lot. quotes, "You couldn't be a demon and have free will." This also applies to angels. So Aziraphale says, people like Crowley and of course himself were set in their ways right from the start. They're fixed. They have defined rules. They can't deviate from this, apparently. Now, a short while later, you get Crowley asserting that being a demon, of course, was supposed to mean you had no free will, but you couldn't hang around humans for very long without learning a thing or two. It's a strange idea that free will can be picked up. It's almost as if they had free will, but they didn't know it, and come to find it. It's so important in the Good Omen universe. Humans continually choose via free will. They affect the development of the world. The supernatural beings, this is even more true. The obvious miracles, the clicking. But they also affect the physical world with their will, and the limits of their imagination. So things will be a certain way because they expect it to be. So in Good Omens, you see, you can change your mind, you can change things, and will is not simply an internal decision, it's an active force. It has agency in the real world. So choosing your free will, choosing to act on your free will is an ethical choice. Now, it's really interesting because it uses demons. Good Omens uses demons to address issues of ethics that have been debated for thousands of years. They continue to be. And it's also fairly extraordinary in how it incorporates so much history of thought into one very funny book and show, and keeps prompting us to think about these things. And that's that. I'll shut up now. So thank you very much. I will stop sharing. And okay. John Milton. That's a good one. Now, Paradise Lost is often considered to be where demons and Satan finally gets a voice. This is not the first time. It's possibly it's extremely well thought out and it's expanded. But before this, you get instances in Dante, you get instances in miracle stories. There's also in Old English, back in sort of the Anglo-Saxon period, you get Christ and Satan. You get Satan having dialogue. He becomes a fully fleshed character already, 1,000 years earlier. To what extent did the church and/or various major theologians historically assert that demons exist as more than metaphors? Definitely. Demons were, and still are, theologically considered to exist in objective reality. And the answer to this is something that I would run out of time if I went into it a bit. But I will also say that I'm very happy to talk to people about this afterwards if anybody is interested. Basically, the cosmology, the foundation of the worldview, is one where spirits of different kinds can and do exist. Excuse me. And it's demons aren't impossible. They make perfect sense in a worldview that has room for the non-human, essentially. I could expand on that, but I'll try and cover a couple more questions. Okay, some of those are, Nikki, those are really good questions, deeply theological, and I'm not sure I have time to, well, the idea that demons are the source of evil, also refuted by the story of Eden. Yes, essentially. The problem was that from a doctrinal point of view, religious authorities have a serious problem with people asserting that sin is not, or evil is not humans' responsibility, for obvious reasons, because it calls into problems law and all sorts of, you know, social systems like that. It's extremely complex. I would say, if evil is action, that's a presupposition. It's evil as action is quite modern, and quite, it is reflected quite a lot in medieval literature, but it's not expressed as such. If you take the starting point that God is good, anything that is against God must be bad. What makes God good in that case? This is a question that I don't really know how to answer, because I'm not sure there is an answer. If God is not good, then essentially a lot of it falls apart. There must be fundamental statements of belief that carry on the argument. There are great debates over this, and I'm not really qualified to talk about that. Okay. I'm fond of demon depiction during the medieval era. What drew me to that particular time period? Because I, as a little undergrad, too many years ago, I started to read some medieval literature, medieval texts, and I was really surprised that it was not the boring monolithic period that sort of modern culture had led me to believe. And I find it really interesting, and that there's so much complexity in the period that still has effects today. Move on. Is gender much of the narrative of demonology? Ooh. Get the impression they're mostly considered male unless sex is involved. I deliberately left out aspects of demonic sex because I wanted to make this a fairly safe for work talk. The questions over demonic gender and demonic ability to have intercourse is discussed very, very often. And to the extent of considering whether they can produce their own sperm, whether they have to steal it from humans. The problem with that is demons seem to be able to shift their form. Demons can certainly appear male or female. That does not necessarily mean that they are. If you certainly angels in the historically have been considered genderless, sexless, pretty much non-physical. They are very spiritual. They're above such things. Demons is a bit more complicated. It'll often depend on whether they're considered very material or very physical, or whether they're spirit. It becomes even more complicated when you get to the witchcraft period in sort of early modern, sort of 16th century onwards, because demons will then very often be depicted as male, particularly male demons that are capable of having sex with female witches, because that sort of furthers this narrative of debauchery and carnal sin and a whole barrel of laughs that's, again, extremely complicated. Let me see. I'm just trying to get this to load. Sorry. I believe I have approximately 2 minutes. The Christian and Wiccan point of view, I'm not that well up on the Wiccan point of view. I apologize. How many kinds of demons are there? It very much depends who you ask. There is no consensus. There have been attempts to define demonic hierarchies. There have been attempts to count the number of demons, very specifically, which is really quite funny, to name demons and things like that. So there are sources for lots of this. Incubi and succubi are probably the main ones that are attested. Other kinds of demons, there are different sources and different things, but a lot of the time it will be one book or one author that has come up with this, or suggests this. The idea that there is a definable list of demons is not accurate, or doesn't really stand up terribly well. I believe I'm probably going to be cut off. Yep, that's us. So it leaves me to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you for participating and asking questions. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, send me messages, or I can talk to you about more of this good stuff. But thank you very much, guys.